regulate us, and just a little asterisk there as well that this is confined to the local alcohol policy. Broader issues not related to this in regards to city safety or say narcotics and other drugs it cannot be handled with this policy, so I'm just going to be a bit strict about us keeping to the scope of this work. Over to you both.
Thank you, councillors. Today, like we've said, today's a background to local alcohol policies in general. Lily is leading this project, and will take us through that. It's a big subject, so we will pause a couple of times as we go through it for questions. And just to be clear, at this point, we're not proposing solutions or options right now. This is a background. That stage will come down the track. We'll discuss that process at the end. We are also conscious, there are many moving parts to this. We're conscious that it's a tight business environment, all those sorts of things. We're aware of those things. And LAP is one element which deals with the licensing aspect that the council's involved in. So it sits alongside many of the other things that the council does. You've got a city safety plan coming to you next week. There's many other aspects to this which sit alongside that. And Lily will highlight some of those things as we work through it. So I'll hand over to Lily, and she'll take us through this.
Thanks, Jeff. Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me. So today I'm here to talk to you about the local alcohol policy. So for context, why are we here? You've been briefed on a city safety plan to address ongoing safety issues and concerns in the central city. This will be presented to you next week. And one of the issues that have been highlighted in the city safety plan is that drug and alcohol-related harm are the top reported factors contributing to perceptions of unsafety. This has been reported in the Residents Monitoring Survey last year. And one of the pillars of the city safety plan is to develop a local alcohol policy to mitigate alcohol-related harm. And where does a local alcohol policy fit? There are many things that the council can do to address alcohol-related harm and safety issues. The local alcohol policy and alcohol licensing is only one of them. It also includes activities by other agencies in harm prevention and reduction, urban design, alcohol bans, business support, enforcement, street management, and transport options. Now, what kind of alcohol-related harm is occurring in the city? This is what the data tells us. This is just a snapshot. More detailed analysis will come to you later on. So in terms of emergency room attendances, for ER admissions that are related to alcohol, they occur more frequently for those who reside in the central city in areas of greater socioeconomic deprivation. In terms of what people are coming to ER for, they are mostly coming for an acute intoxication followed by depressive episodes, head injury and alcohol withdrawal. There are also some temporal patterns to ER attendances related to alcohol. People are more likely to be attending ER for alcohol-related reasons later in the evening and on weekends. And in terms of alcohol-related police incidents, we've also got some geographical patterns here as well. They are more likely to occur in the central city or Te Aro. And in terms of time and day, if we're looking at the city centre, and this is in a 1 kilometre radius from Taranaki Street and Courtney Place, alcohol-related police incidents are more likely to occur later in the evening and in the weekend. And if we're looking specifically at alcohol-related violence incidents, so that includes assaults, aggravated robbery and intimidation, most of the incidents occur in public space and are clustered on busy central streets such as Courtney Place, Manners Street and Dixon Street. And if we're looking over the last 4 years that we have alcohol-related data from the police, around 45% of alcohol-related violence recorded by the police were within this 1 kilometre radius in the central city. So this broadly aligns with what we hear anecdotally about what happens in the city centre at night time. So in late hours in the weekends, there are reported issues with over-intoxication of patrons, crowding outside unlicensed premises, and exacerbation of harm and disorder such as fights, assaults, sexual violence and vandalism. And the things that the council's already undertaking actions to address some of these issues, and these occur outside of alcohol licensing or a local alcohol policy, which can control the supply of alcohol. So that includes attendance at accords to manage public space, bystander training to reduce sexual violence impacts in venues, funding Take 10 sites for intoxicated people to rest and refuel, providing more Māori wardens and physical presence, and an alcohol ban awareness campaign in the CBD, as well as improvements to public space and urban design, including crime prevention analysis and development of a Courtney Place precinct plan to contribute to an improved experience and reputation by diversifying offerings in the area. So we'll just pause here initially for some questions on that.
Councillor Chung?
I noticed that there's a huge number of assaults, both serious assaults and minor assaults. How are the police responding to these things? Like, do they have a greater presence at these times? And are they actually keeping an eye out for them, or is it back to us again?
Kia ora, Councillor Chung. So from what we understand and what we know, police have obviously the PSU teams operating in the early morning, later night hours on the weekends, and also the police beat team, as you know, operate earlier at the earlier times. But they do respond to certainly situations that are violent, any kind of assaults or any kind of aggressive and antisocial behaviour.
Great, thanks. Can I follow up? Yeah. Is there anything we can do to actually enhance this presence? Like, is there a cost behind it, or what's the limitation in getting them out there at those times, the most dangerous times that we're getting the assaults?
Councillor Chung, I'm just conscious that that question can probably be answered by the papers coming out this Thursday. But yeah, that's a really good point. It's definitely something Council's looking to, just not regulated through the local alcohol policy.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councillor Pannett.
So just quickly, obviously the alcohol legislation gives us the ability to do alcohol plan, but nothing around drugs. So, like illegal ones, obviously. So is it basically that we have to rely on government health strategies to manage that for us, given you've identified that as an issue?
That may be a question for some of our other officers, but we can come back to you with a response to that. We have a legislated role in managing alcohol through the licensing process and under the Act. As far as I'm aware, the Council doesn't have a legislative role in managing drug-related harm or illicit drugs.
I mean, we will be doing some stuff through the city safety plan, and we do some things already.
Yep. It's a bit of a bigger, broader question about safety. Yep.
Cool. Free to move on to the next question. Section.
Okay.
Thank you. So, how is alcohol regulated? We've talked about the alcohol-related harm broadly in the city, and how do we manage it? So under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, this sets out the licensing framework for the sale and supply of alcohol. And under the Act, each district has an appointed district licensing committee to make decisions on individual alcohol license applications. Every application requires reporting from representatives from NZ Police and Health NZ on applications to the DLC, as well as the Council's licensing inspectors. There are 4 types of alcohol licences. There's on licences, off licences, club licences, and special licences, and they all have different conditions on their sale and supply of alcohol. and it's illegal to sell alcohol without a license. Any business or organisation that wishes to sell or supply alcohol must first have a license. So what does licensing look like in Wellington City by type and by area? So we have, as of end of last year, 704 alcohol licenses in the city. 542 of those are on licenses where alcohol can be consumed on site. 262 are restaurants and 157 are taverns. That's the name for bars, pubs, and other premises that primarily sell alcohol. Of these licenses, there are about 110 off licenses, which are composed of mostly bottle stores, grocery stores, and supermarkets, and 52 club licenses. So that's your sports clubs, RSAs, and other sort of social clubs. Where are they? So looking broadly across the city, the statistical areas in Wellington with the highest number of active alcohol licenses are the Courtenay SA2 area, Dixon Street East, Wellington Central, and Vivian West, and these are highlighted in the map here. And so out of these 4 areas, they comprise 319 licenses, which is about 45% of the total number of licenses in the city. I think there's a bit of font issues with the slides, but you can mostly see the numbers there. About 136 of those are unlicensed restaurants, 102 are unlicensed taverns. We have 8 bottle stores, 6 grocery stores, and 3 off-licensed supermarkets. And in these 4 areas, 41 of the premises are licensed until 4 a.m. And that's out of 61 premises across the city that are licensed until 4 a.m. Sorry, Jeff?
Sorry, of the bars, pubs, and of the unlicensed taverns, 102 of the 150 of our bars are in that central, so 2/3 of our bars are in that central city. So that's why you've got this concentration.
Great. So why have a local alcohol policy to guide licensing decisions? How is our current problem defined? Currently, the council does not have a LAP, a local alcohol policy, and so the District Licensing Committee applies the provisions of the Act on a case-by-case basis for all decisions on new and renewing licenses. And any objections or oppositions to new applications can be lodged by the reporting agencies, that's the NZ Police, the Medical Officer of Health or Licensing Inspectors, or members of the public. In 2023 and 2024, there were 37 oppositions or objections. When applications are objected or opposed, there can be sometimes significant delays in decision making by the District Licensing Committee and the significant additional costs associated for all parties. That can be in the range of months to years, with associated legal fees to address those. And so it may be difficult to know how the Act is going to be applied to individual licence applications when there's no set policy. Licensees have also reported in the past that, in their view, it's not clear or consistent what might influence an application to be approved or objected to or declined. And so having a policy might give them more guidance on that. So what is a local alcohol policy? How does it work? The Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act allows councils to develop LAPs. They are a set of policy decisions to manage the availability of alcohol, and they must meet the objective of the Act, which is to ensure that the sale, supply and consumption of alcohol is safe and responsible, and that the harm caused by the excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol should be minimised. So what can a LAP do? A LAP can provide greater certainty for applicants about how the District Licensing Committee can consider individual licensing decisions. It will need to go through public consultation and engagement with the regulatory agencies, so it will take into account community preferences and up-to-date evidence, as well as the regulatory agencies' licensing positions. They are given legal importance and the District Licensing Committee must have regard to the provisions of a LAP in the district when they decide on new licences, their very existing licences, or renew existing licences, which is every 3 years. Thanks, Steph. And district licensing committees can refuse licences or subject new conditions to individual licences if they are inconsistent with the LAP. So what rules might be in a LAP? So a LAP can only be about licensing under the Act, and they can have any of the following rules. We will come back to you later with options about what that might be in a proposed LAP. So under the Act, a LAP can contain rules that can limit the location of licences, that can be near certain types of facilities such as schools, health facilities, addiction facilities, marae, community facilities or social housing, or how close licences can be to each other. They can limit the density of licences by saying this is a maximum number of licences of a particular type in an area. It can impose conditions on groups of licences, including a one-way door condition on licences and club licences, where at a certain time you can leave but you cannot enter or re-enter, or discretionary conditions for issuing licences, such as limiting single unit sales. So, for example, you may have a condition that you, as a retailer, you cannot sell 1 can and you can only sell 6 packs. It can also change the maximum opening hours for different premises and have different conditions for different areas. So a bit of background, what has the council done in the past in the local alcohol policy? We developed a provisional LAP in 2013, and this was appealed by various different parties. We held appeal hearings with the Alcohol Regulatory and Licensing Authority in late 2014, but a few years after that, in 2016, the council resolved not to resubmit the LAP after not resolving some of the appeal decisions. What's changed since then? The law changed in 2023 with the Community Participation Amendment Act. This removed the extra step of legal appeals, which made the LAP equal to all other council policies that are consulted on and adopted by the council. The appeal process prevented LAPs from being more widespread, and at the time in 2023, 2/3 of the New Zealand population was not covered by a LAP, including Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington and Christchurch, the largest centres, did not have a LAP. Appeals were expensive to resolve, and that led to many councils abandoning their provisional LAPs. Auckland Council was one of the few councils that pursued all of their legal appeals through judicial review up to the Supreme Court, and they adopted their LAP finally in August 2024. We submitted on this bill, and at the time we supported the removal of the appeals because it would streamline and simplify the policy-making process and make it equal to every other policy at the council. So, a bit more context, what have other councils done? Smaller district councils are more likely to have had adopted a LAP. In 2022, about 2/3 of councils in the country had a LAP, but they were mainly smaller district councils. Metro and larger city councils experienced significant pushback from industry on their LAPs and had, as a result, delayed or abandoned them due to the legal appeals. And they have additional community wellbeing objectives to balance, including economic objectives for employment, events, tourism and GDP. And that is balanced against the alcohol harm management and the social wellbeing purpose of a LAP. If we look at comparable other councils across the Wellington region, Hutt City, Porirua City and Wairarapa currently have an operative LAP. Kapiti Coast is developing a LAP that they will implement once they have a health strategy, and Upper Hutt is considering developing one. Across metros, Auckland, Tauranga and Dunedin now have an operative LAP. Christchurch is developing a draft LAP which they will put through to consultation and adopt before the end of this electoral term. and Hamilton Council is considering developing one in the new financial year. So what are the default rules if there is no LAP? Under the Act, the default trading hours at a maximum for on licences and club licences are that they can sell alcohol from between 8 a.m. to 4 a.m. the next day. For off-licence retailers, they can sell alcohol from between 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. And without a LAP, all applications are determined on a case-by-case basis by the District Licensing Committee based on the Act's criteria. So there are no specific limits on the number, the location, or the type of licences. And individual applications for licences might have different trading hours at maximum and one-way door conditions that are negotiated on a case-by-case basis. And if we're looking at some examples of what other councils have included in their LAPs across the Wellington region, some rules have been differentiated by the areas within the district, and some have specific types of limits. Of interest is for Hutt City, they have different rules for their taverns, hotels, nightclubs and function centres between the CBD and Jackson Street and outside of the area. So for those within the CBD, they have a 1-year probation with a 1 a.m. closing. So new licences are given a year to close at 1 a.m. And if they are successful and there are no issues, they can apply to extend their licensing hours till 3 a.m. And they also have in the Hutt maximum number of off licences for particular suburbs, and those are specified as suburbs with additional vulnerabilities or socioeconomic issues that may be more at risk of alcohol-related harm. Other councils have specific provisions, such as for Porirua, they have a proximity limit to sensitive sites for all licences except supermarkets, and that's defined as schools and drug alcohol treatment providers. Wairarapa also has a proximity limit within 100 metres of sensitive sites for all new off licences except for supermarkets and grocery stores. And if we're looking across the metros, Auckland has different rules for their maximum hours for on licences in their city centre, which have hours from 8 to 4, which are the national default, and 8 to 3 for the rest of the region outside of the city centre. For off licences, Auckland has brought the maximum closing hour for off licences back to 9 p.m. rather than 11 p.m. They've also implemented a temporary freeze on new off licences in the city centre and priority overlay areas for 24 months. So these are your areas that have been identified for additional socioeconomic vulnerabilities, and also implementing a rebuttable presumption against new licences in the neighbourhood centres. So that is a presumption that every new off licence that is applied for will not be granted unless they can prove that they can manage alcohol harm sufficiently. Another interesting rule that Tauranga has for their off licences is that they will not issue any new licences for bottle stores within suburbs with a social deprivation index of 9 or 10. And for Dunedin, they have different on-licence rules for their non-residential areas, and with different closing times for their different types of licences, such as hotels, taverns, restaurants and cafes. Dunedin has a specific provision for entertainment premises to be open from 5 p.m. to 4 a.m, provided that they can have a one-way door policy from 2:30, and they require live entertainment and door charge. And Dunedin also has a sensitive facility proximity restriction for all hotels, taverns or bottle stores that will be applied for. They will generally not be granted if they're within that location limit. And the sensitive facilities are defined as those that are likely to attract young people, such as schools and playgrounds. So that just gives you a feel for what other councils have adopted. So got another break for some questions. I can go back to any slides if anybody wants.
Cool. First Party Deputy Mayor Fern.
Yeah, just with the Auckland passing of their LAP, are they having any noticeable changes in the city yet that they've been able to identify?
So from what I hear, all that's been reported on at this stage is how well it's been working for the council and for retailers. And so far, there haven't been any major issues. In terms of benefits to alcohol harm, I haven't specifically heard anything, but I can inquire and get back to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Councillor Winera.
Apologies if I've missed it, but there was a mention of special licenses. Are there any of those in our city?
I'll just get Helen to speak to that.
So just to be clear, special of licences are for events. So we do have those routinely throughout the year. And if a licensee has a licence already and they want to do something outside the hours of their existing licence, if they've got an event on, then they can apply for a special licence.
Oh, great. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Thank you. That was my main question. My other sort of supplementary was, as part of this, are we going to consider the impacts on, I guess, nightlife in the central city, and how we're going to balance that reduction of harm with the promotion of a vibrant nightlife, vibrant and safe nightlife?
So we will consider all of these when we develop the options for any proposals. The purpose of the licensing framework under the Act is to exercise reasonable control over the sale and supply of alcohol. And so that would be one of the factors to balance when considering how to minimise harm. That is it a reasonable impact on other secondary factors.
Councillor Young.
Thank you. So it really goes back to the first block, but it applies to all of it really. Is there any particular age group that are causing the problems with antisocial behaviour and alcohol?
So I haven't personally looked at the profile of the perpetrators of any police incidents related to alcohol, but that is a follow-up analysis that I can do and report back to you on.
Thank you. And then the other one is looking at the various types like tavern licenses as opposed to, say, restaurant licenses. And it might be complicated because of preloading and side-loading, but are any of those groups in particular the ones that are associated with violence? Like I would have thought, having no knowledge, that it might be more the bars, taverns, rather than the restaurants. But is there any evidence of that?
Sorry, what evidence of which?
Of whether the problem, the people that are causing the problems, are they more likely to come from a bar, a tavern, than, say, a restaurant?
I think I'll try and answer that one for you. If you look at those earlier graphs where the data, so the majority of the harm occurs probably after midnight. So you can probably draw your own conclusion from that with most of the restaurants.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was a stupid question, come to think of it, but thank you.
Councillor.
I'm sorry, one thing to add is that the main distinction between taverns and restaurants is that taverns are licensed because they primarily sell alcohol, whereas restaurants provide food and other forms of entertainment. So
thank you.
The risks associated with alcohol may be higher with taverns just on the basis that their main activity is to sell alcohol.
Not once have I thought, I'm going to pop down to the tavern. I find it such a strange word to call what I know as a pub. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you. 3 questions. I'm thinking about the case at the moment with Greg Wilson, where we have council wading into regulation of marketing activities. Is that the kind of stuff that we're seeking to take more direction over with a LAP?
So an LAP can include discretionary conditions, and that may include some conditions on marketing, but that's at the discretion of the District Licensing Committee, so it's not a compulsory condition.
Okay. With the direction of travel for this over the default rules, reading between the lines, it seems like we're looking to be more restrictive than permissive under the default settings. So I suppose my question is, what council decisions have come through yet to date that have set this as the direction of travel that we want to pursue with the LAP?
What council decisions have come through which would set the direction of travel? The one thing, I guess, there is a concern around city safety and the perception of that. So yeah, and there's a city safety plan coming to you. This is just one element of that, which just deals with just the licensing aspect. So that would probably be the council decision, which is probably driving that direction. That there's certainly this, but it also, I think, just to be clear, and it was in there, that this also provides a lot more certainty to the licensing process, so that each license isn't come in and debated on its own merits and been able to be openly objected to by the other agencies. So that part of it, one of the strengths of this is actually to give certainty to that process.
Okay. And
Would it be, I just wanted to clarify, because I think you raised a helpful point prior to this workshop, was that we are still regulated within the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, so we cannot be more permissive than what the law currently sets out. Right, and the main function of the Act is to minimise alcohol harm, so we wouldn't be able to do anything that does the opposite to that. I just found that helpful before when Lily and Jeff were kind of framing it about where an LAP sits.
yeah, I suppose. So the last thing, I guess, because we have a default regime and, councillors are fond of putting work on the staff, but what's the resource required to go through, establish the LAP and consult, and if it should be adopted, change, regulate, is this a relatively substantial piece of work that we're chewing off here?
It's a decent piece of work, but it's not anymore, especially now that the appeal process is out of the way. We can work through that, talk to the agencies, come back with a proposal which we can agree around the the councillors can agree around the table, and then it can be adopted and put in place. So that's and then the licensing process just continues. They just have to take account of the councillors' decisions through that process. So it is no more onerous than. No, I wouldn't. I'll consider it less. It's quite a thorny. Not thorny, but there's some things which we need to balance as we go through that and provide advice. But it's no more difficult than others.
I would also add that by having prescribed policies and provisions for guiding licensing decisions, that it may take some of the burden off the licensing team and the associated reporting agencies, because it simplifies the process and they don't have to negotiate through objections or oppositions to individual licenses.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for this. When we're looking at the District Licensing Committee or group or commissioners, do they have a prerequisite type of skill that we actually need to have, so that would we, as council officers, would we have those same skills, and does that make any difference?
So the District Licensing Committee are appointed by council, Our chairs of the committee are lawyers. So I think it's to be clear that the District Licensing Committee will still be making the decisions from the applications. The local alcohol policy doesn't move that burden from them. Is that what you're trying to
Yes, but what I'm saying is that when we set the rules, do we actually need to have specialist expertise in it to be able to know what rules are set and whether they're too stringent or not stringent enough?
Well, that's a matter for consultation and for decision by council.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And the second question I have is that we used to have dry areas in Wellington. Do we still have those? Or?
We still have an alcohol ban, if that's what you're referring to.
Well, I seem to remember that we had suburbs in Wellington that weren't allowed to have. No.
No, we no longer have those.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
I had myself down next on the list. So we talked about licensees proving that they have no incidences of harm, say, for a year. Is there an ability to prove that they are safe? So we're putting the emphasis on proactive safety measures rather than removing something after harm is caused. Like, can they get points for having harm reduction training for staff and loads of food or, yeah.
Yeah.
We actually have an active inspectorate who go out regularly to just check on compliance and how the bars are performing. So in effect, no news is good news. So, but, we can look at other measures that we would like people to be cognizant of.
Yeah, curious to understand if an LAP can give provision to putting a focus on licensees being good licensees. So rather than like an inspection service, maybe like they get expedited in getting their license or anything. Is that within the ability of a LAP?
I'm not sure if I can answer that or Helen. I think that was one of the areas where we had some difficulty last time because we tried to adopt a risk management framework which allowed, which was one of the points which was disputed in court. So we did go down that line, but that was sort of ruled to be outside the Act.
Cool, thank you. Councillor Pennant.
So, Councillor Waniera's question is quite common, that New Zealand believes that we need alcohol for vibrancy. There's quite a, and I want to, because I really want to challenge that, the number of young people drinking in the UK, for example, is halved, partly because of Muslim population health consciousness, and so this is really good. Does the LAP allow us to take a public health approach to the fact that this is a class 1 carcinogen, just like, tobacco, which, most people wouldn't recommend you do. And because I do want to understand whether actually we could envisage a different way of dealing with having fun in our city than getting trashed.
So through the analysis of relevant data, which is required under the Act to develop a local alcohol policy, we are looking at health data, and that will include long-term health effects, not just immediate health effects of acute intoxication. So when we are able to receive hospital-related data from Health NZ, we will be able to include that in our assessment.
As a major carcinogen?
That will be part of the advice, yes, and the Cancer Society advocates on this as well.
Yeah, and have you got any thinking about the way a city could look without lots of drinking? I'm not saying no drinking, but, not as much.
I think that's probably outside the scope of a local alcohol policy, but because this is dealing with the licensing, but it's a good question. It is, and it's certainly, absolutely, and it's, I think that, and I think that's what I say when we go back and look at this. This is one part of a much wider thing. So we are doing the precinct plan for Courtney Place. There's a whole lot of other things which happen, which about what our entertainment offering is in that space, or there's a whole lot of other things which also have an impact on alcohol-related harm. So that is a wider discussion. I don't know if Anna wants to talk.
I would just say, Councillor, that the vast majority of our support goes towards things that enable, like events, venues, that enable diversity and vibrancy, that don't centre around alcohol. But yes, the hospitality sector, I would also say, is incredibly important to the city as well. But I think it's about what we know from safety. It's about the diversity of that offering. So restaurants, entertainment, bars are part of it, but they're not the only part. So more and more research shows that a more diversified, a safer environment at night time is a more diversified environment at night time.
I would just note that Jim Beam advertised to young people hard spirits for many years.
Okay. We have three people left to ask partais and one more section left. So I'm just going to ask that we keep this concise so we can get all the information. Councillor Abdurrahman.
In the act or when the policy that you're looking at, how do you define when you say alcohol-related harm? Is that the harm to the person, to another person? Is that a social issue, a health issue, a safety issue, or a combination of all?
So alcohol-related harm is defined in the Act, and it's the harm associated with excessive or inappropriate consumption of alcohol. And I don't have the exact wording here, but it also includes any kind of harm to the individual, others, to the community, and to society more generally. So it can encompass a very broad range of harms.
Is that probably a time to bring in Sahai? Then how do you address, if that is how alcohol-related harm is defined, how the city safety addresses all those related issues, or is that city safety's main job is also addressing those issues in general?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we've reflected this work in the city safety plan overall, and some of the initiatives that we've outlined throughout all of the pillars, especially with regards to pillar 3 in supporting a safe night out, look at initiatives and interventions that we're trying to implement to reduce that harm, and whether that's from the work in expanding our support for alcohol and drug-related education and harm reduction strategies, or the work that we're doing to explore the care officers. Those are things that we are sort of, that underpins the work that we do.
Councillor Rogers.
This might be coming up in the next section, but I guess it was kind of looking at the difference between the 2013 provisional policy and kind of what we're looking at now. I'd be interested in understanding sort of your weightings around the scope that we should be looking at for doing our LAP, and where you think the best time to focus our resource and attention is, or, you know, is it a focused approach or is it a broad approach? But maybe that comes up later, I'm not sure.
I think we can discuss this at a later date when we have some proposals on hand, and we will come back to brief you once we've done some more stakeholder engagement and summarise some more research, so we can then come to you with key findings from what our other interest groups are saying about what the issues are, and therefore what solutions we should be focusing our efforts in.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Cowart.
Thank you. When you say what solutions we should be focusing on, are you talking about how this might look, or are you talking about broader solutions?
So to be clear, this is just the scope of the local alcohol policy, so only licensing related solutions, but it may be that through the feedback that we get from additional stakeholder engagement that we can identify additional issues that we may want to resolve through other means.
And when you talk about stakeholders, are you talking about the businesses as well?
Yes, so by stakeholders, we mean businesses, license holders, and their industry representative groups, as well as community groups that represent different segments of the community and the regulatory agencies under the Act.
So the approach that you've outlined to date, if elected members felt that that was not the right approach that you're taking, how do we influence? Without you doing too much more work going down a particular path. I haven't read all the 35 pages. I'm still trying to download of the presentation, but I'm interested to understand how we might shape this work currently to what you may have proposed here.
So we haven't proposed anything as yet, and I will go through the process in the next section to identify the points that you can provide additional feedback. So
Yes, but it's not what you think we can provide. I'm just trying to understand how we can shape it.
Lily, the next section is about what happens next, so I think perhaps this will be answered by the following slides.
Yeah, I've had a quick look through the slides and I couldn't really see it in there.
So we've done some initial work. We will continue to work with you so that the councillors are actively involved in this process. We will obviously we had intended to come to you earlier, but there's there's been a range of other things on the table at the moment. So we over this next year we'll continue to work with you with the aim to come in back with proposals, probably within the new council, but that's simply, that's just a timing thing with the election and things like that on the table.
Cool. Over to the next section.
So, in terms of what Wellingtonians think, we've conducted some research by surveying a panel of Wellington residents, and we selected the panel to have a demographic representation that reflected Wellington's makeup. And so some of the notable results from this survey are that generally people drink moderately, most commonly 2 to 4 times a month, and about 1 to 2 standard drinks each time. The most popular place to buy alcohol from is the supermarket, followed by pubs, bars and nightclubs. Most of the survey respondents agreed that alcohol is an important economic and social role in the city, and pubs, bars and nightclubs are seen as places where most alcohol-related harm occurs, followed by public events, public spaces and private residences. The most common type of harm that has been reported is feeling unsafe in a public place due to another person's drinking, and that overwhelmingly is more than any other type of harm experienced by the person. And regarding attitudes to alcohol management measures by licensing, there are generally split opinions without strong majority preference, except for most respondents agree that there should be restrictions on how close some licensed premises are to sensitive sites, particularly for bottle stores and pubs, bars and nightclubs. And the priority sites in order of priority have been noted as early childhood education centres and primary schools, secondary schools, medical and rehab facilities, and community facilities like parks, playgrounds and sports facilities. And to revisit the timeline of what we're going to do. So we've already completed some actions. Officers have submitted on the amendment bill in 2023. We've engaged with other councils on the policy process, and we have done some research on alcohol harm and surveying the public. We are now briefing you on an introduction to the lab, and then in the next quarter we will begin to engage with stakeholders further prior to any proposals being formed, and then come back and brief you on our findings later in the year. And from next year onwards, we will then workshop with you potential options that may be in a lap, and if approved, we will seek approval on a draft LAP, and we will seek approval for this to go to consultation. So that's it. I can go back to any slides if anybody wishes.
Councillor Pennant.
Have you got any other data on how much people are drinking? Because that is a self-reported amount, and people not are always truthful on surveys about their consumption of things like that.
So that is a perennial question that has not fully been resolved by any kind of official statistic. So our best proxy is self-reported data, although we will refer to in our research reports to any measured studies, objective studies. But even the volume of alcohol that is being sold is only collected at a national level, and so we do not have local data on any of these points.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks. Off licenses subject to the same conditions as on licenses when selling alcohol. That is, in on licenses, I believe that if the bartender or whoever selling the alcohol considers that the customer is drunk too much or is intoxicated, they're not to sell them anymore. But when you're buying off at an off license, are they also subjected to that criteria?
Yes, they are. They do, and they are prohibited from selling to intoxicated people or underage people, just the same as a non-licensed.
Fantastic. I don't see any further partai. Thank you both so much for your time and your work around this mahi. And I'm sure we all look forward to the safety plan and other information about how an LEP fits in with the rest of the city coming shortly. Cheers.